It is absolutely amazing to be here at Data Science Go Connect. Thank you to Diane for organizing everything, and then thank you to all of you guys for coming along as well. Hopefully it will be a really fun session, and hopefully I can give you some advice around the sort of hiring process within data science, which you can then go and use and have more success, moving from either where you are at the moment into your first role in the field, or maybe moving from where you are into, moving onwards and upwards into a better role. And I'm definitely looking forward to chatting to everyone in the Q&A session afterwards. So let's all interact in that. I'll let you know what you need to do at the time for that. So my goal today, I guess, is just to give you all some really simple but effective tips for how to get ahead in the hiring process, right from, your resume, which is essentially your marketing document, right through to when you are sitting in that interview chair getting asked the real world hard questions. And like I said, whether you're after your first role or you're looking to move onwards and upwards into a better role from where you currently are, it is fair to say that data science or even, data analytics can be a really, really competitive place to be. So many people are applying for each role. It's almost like a survival of the fittest situation going on. But do trust me when I say that while the changes in the tips, which I suggest to you today, are super simple, they will have a much bigger impact than you might think. Anyway, before I get into that, I should probably introduce myself, as I'm sure there are many of you who won't be familiar with me or the sorts of things that I'm working on at the moment. So my name's Andrew Jones, and I have been working in the areas of analytics and data science for around 14 years now. But my journey to where I am now is a little bit of an odd one, I guess you could say. So I didn't study data science, or I didn't study computer science, or even mathematics at university. Instead, I did degrees in marketing and psychology, and actually just happened to land my first role as a marketing analyst simply by playing indoor cricket with the manager of that team. And in this role, I started using a programming language called SAS. I'd never really used programming or coding before. I didn't really know anything about it, but I was just blown away by how you could not only manipulate and analyze data, but also how you could use things like machine learning to predict what customers were going to do next. I thought that was just amazing that you can do these types of things. And I was just hooked. I've been so passionate about it ever since that I've continued learning, moving into different roles in different industries. And in more recent times, like Diane said, I've been fortunate to work for Amazon, as well as more recently at Sony PlayStation, where I was building and prototyping machine learning-based features for the PlayStation 5, which you can imagine was a pretty fun role. Anyway, as of March 2020, so March of last year, I embarked on a completely new journey, creating my very own online data science program, which is called Data Science Infinity. And this is what's keeping me extremely busy these days. And without going into too much detail on that at the moment, it's a program which is built differently from any other data science course that's available. At the highest of levels, I guess you could say it's all about getting students results rather than just getting students another certificate. Anyway, back to my career, and this is more closely linked to what I'll be speaking about today. In my career, I've been in the very fortunate position to have interviewed and screened hundreds of analytical and data science candidates. And the reason that I say I've been fortunate to have done this is that it's really allowed me to understand what the difference is between candidates who are successful in going on and getting the role and those candidates who unfortunately miss out time and time again. So what I've done for today is I've distilled some of these learnings and these findings into some key sort of high-level tips, which will hopefully guide you, into and through the hiring process into a great role in our exciting field. So let's get into it. And I will start by saying this. The data science hiring process is a little bit broken. Now, that is probably quite a big statement for me to make. So what do I mean by that? Well, even though the field is still maturing, we're still seeing some really, really bad interviewing and hiring practices. So firstly, data science job descriptions are still being loaded with every possible tool and programming language on the face of the earth. So essentially anything that's on the company's tech stack is just being slapped onto the job description, and they think that's a good way to show what that company or what that team is all about, and it isn't. Secondly, we're still seeing an overemphasis on the number of years of experience a candidate has, or perhaps whether they have a master's or a PhD. Now, these things are incredible achievements, but they are not as strong of an indicator of candidate value, or I guess you could say candidate potential, as some companies think they are. And third, and this one's so common, and it really needs to change. In interviews, candidates are still being asked to complete these insanely specific and difficult coding tasks that would never be needed in the role. It blows my mind, and I think it's truly bizarre that this is still happening. A candidate that just happens to know the answer to that very specific question is not necessarily the candidate which is going to serve the company best in the day-to-day or the week-to-week tasks that role actually requires. So as candidates, unfortunately, you're kind of up against it from day one. But believe me when I say that I'm very passionate about rectifying all of this. Not only is it bad for candidates, it's actually really inefficient for the companies that are hiring. And on that note, next week, I'm actually speaking at another Data Science Go event, this time specifically for executives. And I'll be running them through why it's so inefficient to do it this way, as well as an approach that can be much more effective. So trust me, I am definitely on your side here. Anyway, I guess while the hiring process is broken at times, there are definitely things you can do to get yourself ahead of the competition. And that's really what I want to speak to you about today. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get stuck into that. So in my head, there are kind of three main ways that you can showcase your skills as a new or an aspiring data scientist or data analyst. You've got your resume or CV. You've got potentially a portfolio of projects that you've built or that you've worked on. And then I guess you could say that actually interviewing, for roles is showcasing your skills. It's just in a much more formal way. And the interview stage that I'm talking about here, I mean, that can take on, many different forms. That can be technical tests or coding tests. That can be take-home assignments. And of course, it can be more behavioral-based questions. And all of these areas make up, a huge part of what I help my students with every day within Data Science Infinity. But because we don't have all the time in the world here, what I'm going to do is just give you my best piece of advice for each of them, the things that I think can have the biggest impact with the least amount of effort. So let's start at the top with your resume. And the thing that I want to make absolutely clear about a resume is that it's never going to get you the job on its own. It's essentially a way of getting probability to work in your favor. The more interviews that you can get through to because of your resume, the better the chance of you landing the role that you want. So don't let a bad CV or a bad resume hold you back from that by not even giving you the chance to really show everything that you've got. Now, there are kind of three things that I've noticed during my time that can make a data science resume stand out over others. So generally speaking, all candidates for a specific job are going to be around the same level. So these are not technical specific things. They're the ways that you frame yourself that can really make you stand out from similar level candidates. And like I promised, they are super simple but very effective. So the first one is make sure that you include a summary at the top, briefly outlining what you bring to the role. But always mention that you're looking to solve business problems with data science solutions. I mean, literally put those words in. I look to solve business problems with data science solutions. Now, you might be sitting there going, that's just a sentence that I'm going to put at the top of my resume. How could that possibly make a difference? Well, I will tell you right now, it will make you stand out from the other candidates because 95% of candidates are just looking to shout about their skills. At the end of the day, you are being hired to solve business problems. So you've immediately synced with this in your opening description, and it can be very, very powerful to do that. So don't underestimate a sentence like that at the very start. Next, when you're actually listing out the projects that you've worked on in the past, and this makes up a really big part of your resume and a big part of what the reader of your resume is actually focusing on. For each project, make sure that you include these three things. So one sentence on what the task or the business problem was. So some quick context for the reader. Then one sentence on the tools and the techniques that you used. So essentially, what did you actually do? And finally, and this is almost always left off, one sentence on what the result was. And make sure you use tangible figures where possible. So, for example, it drove $100,000 worth of sales, or it reduced signups by 4%, or it reduced costs by 20% year on year. These tangible figures really sell the fact that you're somebody who knows the business and you're somebody who knows how to add value with your skills. So make sure you get those figures in where possible. It can make more of a difference than you think. And again, trust me, 90% of candidates looking for data science roles, they just focus on the what you did section in the middle there, and they don't give any context on the other two. So again, it's a very, very simple change, but it is a way to stand out. And if you include all three of these things for each of those projects, it really starts ticking the subconscious boxes in the hiring manager's brain. And you'll hear me say that kind of thing a little bit. It's probably because I did study psychology. It's kind of how I'm thinking about things. But it shows them that you're different from the rest, that you understand the context of what you do in terms of, business considerations. And that is gold dust, trust me. It really isn't all about your technical skills when you're looking for a new data science role or you're looking for your next data science role. It's about showcasing what value you can add with your technical skills. So the coding languages and the tools that you use, they obviously are super important. You need them to add the value, but you want to showcase how you've added value with them, not just a list of things that you know. And the third resume tip that I wanted to share is that in the section where you're listing out courses you've completed or perhaps the certificates that you've earned. And this is something that you'll often have, especially when you're earlier in your career. And before I move on to my specific kind of tip or advice around this, I want to stop and say one thing. There is a lot of negativity on platforms such as LinkedIn about people posting their certificates. You get these gatekeepers, as I call them, bad-mouthing anyone who posts a certificate, saying that it doesn't mean anything. So one bit of side advice: don't worry about these petty, sad little people. You should be super proud of achieving a certificate, whatever it is. And I think you should post it on LinkedIn, and I think you should put it on your resume. But just know that they won't hold much weight on their own with a hiring manager when they see them listed on your resume, unless you can add one simple minor addition. And that is, for each of your certificates or courses that you've completed, supplement it with the actionable learnings that you got from that online course or that you got en route to earning that certificate. So instead of just listing NLP 101 on Udemy, like you see in the middle of the screen there, list it and then underneath put one or two sentences, it doesn't have to be much, showing what you learned from it. And more importantly than that, what you could build or what you could create using what you learned. So I've just made this up for illustrative purposes, but here I've got, instead of just NLP 101 on Udemy, underneath I've got actionable learnings, sentiment analysis on customer reviews. This could be utilized to flag up customer complaints to a dedicated support team, improving customer satisfaction. Like I say, I just made that up. But the key point is this: instead of the hiring manager just seeing words and not really being able to extrapolate how this course or certificate might help them, which at the end of the day is what they're really wanting to see, you've started the cogs in their brain turning, and it's another subconscious addition in their view of you as a value-adding data scientist or data analyst. And believe me, again, hardly anybody is doing this. And it's another very, very simple way that you can stand out above your competition. Right, so let's keep moving. That was resumes. So let's now talk about portfolios and the projects within them. So portfolios can be a really, really good way to showcase your skills when you're kind of more early on in your data science or data analytics career. But I want to quickly bust a myth about these portfolio projects, and that is that data science portfolio projects need to either use huge volumes of data or they need to be applying extremely complex machine learning and deep learning based solutions. Trust me, they really, really do not. And we can safely say that that statement is a big old myth. Now, a varied portfolio of clearly communicated projects can be so much more beneficial. So when building up your portfolio, look to put much more emphasis on clarity and impact rather than just on complexity. Just like I talked about with resumes, the reality is that hiring managers are super, super busy with their day-to-day tasks, of their actual jobs. And recruiters have, I don't know, at least 100 or maybe more candidates who are looking for the role. So if they're going to look through your portfolio, you need to make it quick and easy for these guys to see the value that you can add. And easy is not, screeds of code. It's not super complex algorithms without any context around what the approach is actually solving. So my main pieces of advice for portfolio projects are, at the very top of your write-up, whether it's on GitHub or wherever else you're presenting it, it doesn't really matter too much. Include an easy-to-digest summary of the project right from inception through to conclusion. And this summary would include, a brief overview of the business problem that you're going to be attacking with this piece of work. Then it would have a brief overview of the final solution that you chose and why you chose it. And then finally, a brief overview of the results that you saw. And again, just like resumes, this is about making the life of the reader easy. If they can understand your project before diving into the details, this is great for them and subsequently great for you as a candidate. The easiest way to complete this summary section is to do it last, as it's just going to give the reader a really quick overview of what's to follow, just in all of its gory and impressive detail. And speaking of that, you really want to structure the full write-up for your projects in that same way. So starting with the context, in other words, what's the problem you're looking to solve? And perhaps, what would success look like in this particular scenario? You'll follow that with the actions. So in other words, what did you do? The code, any data exploration, and then data visualization, things like that. And then in a section of its own, emphasize the results or the impact that your project had. And this goes beyond things like accuracy metrics. So explain, or even maybe if it's a sort of a project using a data set you got off Kaggle, hypothesize the impact that this might have on a business or a customer. This is the most important part, of a project in the real world, and it's what hiring managers are often most interested in seeing, but it gets left off by so many candidates. And I touched on code just before. So with any code in your projects, just make absolutely certain that it's really clear and well documented. If you have different parts, different parts of the project along the way, then break it up into functional sections rather than just have one file or notebook. Again, make the life of the reader easy, make it easy for them to see your value, and make sure that they don't have any reason to put your portfolio in the kind of too hard basket, because these guys are busy and it's not a perfect world and they potentially will do that. And then finally, and this is, I guess, a much higher level piece of advice, pick projects or data sets that excite you or interest you. And why do I say that? Well, when you're working on them, and this is from experience with me and talking to data science candidates as well, you're going to be far more motivated to ask the right questions. You're going to be more motivated to dig deeper into the data and see what you can find, and potentially look into different solutions or test different techniques that you could possibly use. And when it comes to interview time, that excitement and passion will shine through when you're discussing these projects. Seeing passionate candidates is like the biggest turn on for hiring managers. They can see the value that you could add over time, and this is a massive positive for them, both consciously and subconsciously. So that's kind of my high-level, simple but impactful advice for portfolios. Remember, clarity and impact over complexity, and then a structure that makes it quick and easy for the reader to see the value that you can actually add. So I guess now you're at the stage where your resume's got you in the door, your portfolio has impressed, and now it would be time to face the real music. Head into that formal interview stage. And like you all know, and like I mentioned at the start, this can consist of many different things. It can consist of coding tests, take-home assignments, and then behavioral questions. So let's take a quick look at each of those. So firstly, coding tests, and these will often take place quite early in the process because they want to weed out people that essentially don't have the core competencies for the role. So as a bit of background, for Data Science Infinity, my data science program, I regularly speak to a lot of data science leaders and hiring managers and recruiters from various companies around the world to ensure that the curriculum and the advice is on point. And the latest statistics that I've got for coding tests is that around 61% of data science hiring managers do get candidates to undertake a coding test of some sort. 29% do sometimes, and around 10% don't. Now, I would look at those percentages and I'd say, yeah, this is definitely something I need to be prepared for. And like I said before, this test can take many different forms. It can be based on different coding languages. It can be of varying levels of difficulty. It can just be based around core concepts of probability or statistics. It really does depend on the company, the team, and the specific role that you're going for. But the key thing here, because we don't have time to go through the specifics of coding test questions, my advice is that this coding test almost always happens straight away after you've spoken to the recruiter or to HR. So my advice is this: make sure you ask absolutely everything about that coding test on that call. Ask what it involves, ask what coding language it'll be in, ask exactly how it will be conducted. Will it be done online? Will it be done on an internal company portal? Or will it be undertaken on a platform such as HackerRank or LeetCode? Just get every little bit of information you can. And the reason that I say that is the more prepared you are than other candidates you can be, because you were sensible to ask these questions, straight away you're putting yourself in this really advantageous position. Now, for most, I guess, entry-level data science or data analyst positions, this test is going to be based in SQL or maybe Python and R. Sometimes you can even choose yourself. It's just solve this particular problem with whatever tool you see as appropriate. The level of difficulty will definitely vary. Often it starts with much more basic questions and then slowly moves up to more complex ones where they're trying to test different scenarios and make sure that you're really thinking about what different possible outputs could come and what problems could arise. But if the role's more focused on insights and analytics, then the test is going to be less complex than, say, for a role where it's focused more around engineering type skills. But long story short, get as much information as you can on what it will entail and then practice. There is nothing better for this type of test than being in the right mindset. And this just comes from consistent practice. And there are, as you all know, there are a lot of different online resources for practicing things like this, but just make sure you're focusing on the right thing when you do practice. I know so many aspiring data scientists who are going for interviews and they're getting super stressed trying to answer all sorts of insanely complex software engineering type questions, for example, when they're not going to need that in the test. In theory, we've already talked about how the hiring process is a little bit broken, but don't stress yourself out studying the wrong thing. Get as much information about what it's going to be about and then practice that. And I guess now you could say, once you've nailed the coding test, often you'll get given a take-home assignment. That's kind of the natural progression in the interview process. So let's discuss that. And not all companies actually will make you do these. Again, from my research for Data Science Infinity, we're looking at around 55% of hiring managers utilizing take-home assignments for candidates and around 45% not. And even though you might say that 55% seems a bit lower than you thought, if you were applying for 10 roles, then you'd be expected to do a take-home assignment for about 5 or 6 of them. So it is definitely good to know how to approach these in a way that will impress and in a way that will put you ahead of other candidates. So number one for a take-home assignment, always make sure you understand the precise problem that's being asked of you. If you don't, make sure you get clarification early. Don't wait until near the deadline. Don't wait until the next day. Ask as early as you can. And sometimes they'll be vague on purpose with these take-home assignments, but either way, it's best to ask anything that you're not sure about before you start. And this seems like a super obvious bit of advice, but don't be afraid to get some confirmations if you need them. Otherwise, you could waste a lot of time. Next, think about, and this is really important, think about why they are getting you to do this particular task. So there will be some specific motivation behind this. If you figure that they're trying to get you to showcase your coding abilities, then you can focus more on that. If you think it's more about storytelling and visualization aspects, then you can lean more towards that. Now, most likely, there will be a number of things that they're looking for, but if you figure that there might be something of particular interest, then, you can make sure that you do that part really, really well. Another way to think about this is to sit and think about, like, what would this role entail day to day or week to week, and try and show those skills as best you can. Next, make assumptions where necessary. It is completely fine to make assumptions about the data or about the company, as long as you state them as assumptions. If you make an assumption about their company and it turns out to be incorrect, that's not actually a big deal. The reality is you can't really be expected to know everything about their operations, but just try to make these assumptions as sensible as possible, but do state that they were assumptions if you make them. Now, moving on to actually starting the work on the assignment itself. So something that can be useful, especially if they don't give you much time, which sometimes they will, they'll put a bit of a time pressure on you, is to quickly sketch out a high-level plan, but separate everything in your plan into two parts. And I call these two parts the necessities and the luxuries. And what I mean by this is, say you think, based on the information given in the take-home assignment, that the project needs some data exploration and cleaning, then a predictive model needs to be built, and then perhaps a summary of the results of the outcomes that you've seen. Sketch up a plan of these basic steps. So essentially like an MVP, or a minimum viable product, where you're just looking to get something in place, the bare minimum in place. These are your necessities. And like I said, they make up the bare minimum requirements to complete the task. Once you've noted down the necessities, think of the unique, or I guess the special things that you could add for a version 2 of this assignment. And these are your luxuries. So instead of just data exploration and cleaning, perhaps as a luxury, and I'm just making this up, you could mock up the design of an ETL process that might extract and load the data. Instead of just building a predictive model, think up different models or algorithms that you could test in a way to creatively judge how performant they are. Maybe even think about how you might refine a model's parameters to get the best results. Instead of just summarizing the results, perhaps you could do some data visualization. And I know those examples are super simple, but the point that I'm getting to here is come up with a way in your plan to get an MVP version in place, and then go for it. Get that work done and save that as version 1. Then, if you've got time left after that, pick from your list of luxuries and see if you can add some of your flair to the project. The benefit of doing it this way is you're never going to run out of time. You're always going to create yourself a baseline solution. And if you do run out of time, you can just add in a section at the end which talks about your luxuries in terms of, if I had more time to complete this, I would have looked at X, Y, and Z. And this can actually really impress. So maybe you did run out of time, but they can see that you're thinking so much more broadly than maybe other candidates were. So yeah, think about the whole plan in terms of necessities and luxuries. Build the necessities out and then add the flair with the luxuries. So now you're in a position where you've smashed that take-home assignment and you're heading in for the big one, the on-site interview, where you're going to be running through more behavioral-based questions. So I want to give you the absolute simplest way to nail behavioral questions, and that is to prepare in the same way that you want to answer, using the STAR technique. And while many of you, if not all of you, will have no doubt heard of the STAR format or the STAR technique, today I'm going to share a bonus letter at the end of this magical acronym that can really, really make you stand out from the crowd. And to give a full disclaimer, to give full and deserved credit for this mystery letter, which I will talk about in a second, I must give a shout out to Gigi, aka the Amazon interview whiz, pictured bottom right of the screen here. So Gigi is an ex-colleague of mine from Amazon, and she came up with this letter. So if you are looking for, without doubt, and I mean this, the best interview advice online, go to YouTube and look up the Amazon interview whiz. So she specifically gives advice around interviewing at Amazon, but Amazon has such a good hiring process that this stuff applies anywhere, trust me. Anyway, let's run through the STAR technique now. And like I say, it is super, super simple, but it can be very effective. So for each project that you might need to talk about in the interview, when you're preparing, make sure that you're well-versed on S, which stands for situation. And this is the context around the business problem and why it needed to be solved. Starting with this really pulls the interviewer into your narrative. It gives you a foundation for you to go into all of the details following that without losing them. Next is T for task. So what was your specific role in the broader project? This is super simple. You don't need to spend much time here, but it's good to be transparent about what your responsibilities were and where you were in more of a supporting role. Next is action, and this refers to the specific actions that you took from inception right through to conclusion. And this is where most of your answer will lie in a technical interview, like a data science interview or a data analyst interview. And when you prepare this section for each of the projects that you might want to talk about, refine this down to the most succinct and compelling narrative that you can, but keep some supplementary context up your sleeve. And a good example of this is, why did you choose solution C over solution A and solution B? So it may very well be that you went and built a random forest, but you probably had a couple of other options on the table when you went and built that. Keep the thinking around why you chose that particular model up your sleeve. A really good interviewer will ask these types of questions. So it's really good to have them front of mind. Next is results. Super, super important, but so often missed, or at least underemphasized. And like we talked about for the other parts of the process, look to use tangible figures. So example, drove X dollars in sales or saved Y hours. Now, I mentioned that I had another letter to add. So this is the huge suspense can be over. And I can tell you that this letter is I for improvement. And again, let's make sure that we give Gigi, the Amazon interviewers, full credit for this. But for each project, ask yourself, if I could start this project again now, what would I do differently? And this sort of thinking can be so much more impactful than you might think. It shows both awareness of business impact, it shows an understanding of the nuance of what you do from a technical point of view, and it shows a growth mindset that you're always looking to learn and always looking to improve. And trust me, that is a lethal combination in an interview. So I'm not sure exactly how long that all took, hopefully not too far off 30 minutes, but the one final thing that I want to say is that, and you may have actually noticed this as I ran through, everything I talked about today, whether it's your resume or your portfolio of projects or how you're answering questions in interviews, it all really boils down to the same overarching idea. In this field, when you look, whether you're looking for your first role or you're looking to move up in your career, it's really not about showcasing how many skills you have or how many concepts you know. It's all about demonstrating and showcasing clearly the value you can add with those skills. So if you take that mindset and you think about each project you're working on or that you've worked on in the past and prepare for interviews in that way, then you are really, really going to shine. Trust me, I've seen so many candidates do this and so many candidates not do this. And I've seen so many candidates be successful because of these things. So definitely keep them in mind next time you're preparing for an interview. Now, before we jump into the live Q&A session, which I'm super excited about, because Diane, who is the amazing organizer of this event, kind of told me I should, if you all don't mind, I'd like to very, very quickly share some high-level details about my data science program, Data Science Infinity. I'll be very, very quick. And like I mentioned earlier, I've created this program in a way that's different to other courses on other platforms because it's really all about the journey rather than any fixed destination. It's all about students actually getting the results that they want. And there are essentially 4 parts to the program that I feel set it apart from others. Firstly, you're going to learn the right content. And this is based upon input from hundreds of leaders and hiring managers and recruiters in the field. So you're focusing your time and energy learning skills that hiring managers actually need and want. And throughout the presentation today, you saw a couple of statistics that I pulled up around how many hiring managers are using coding tests and how many are using things like take-home assignments. I've been interviewing and having conversations with hiring managers from all over the globe to make sure everything in Data Science Infinity is as impactful as it can be for people who want success in this field. There's over 220 tutorials in it, covering things like SQL, Python, statistics, A/B testing, machine learning, softer skills that can really transform you from a good data scientist into a great data scientist, and then a full section on optimizing your resume and help with interviews. Kind of like what we've been talking about today, just in much more detail and delivered in a much less rapid fashion. Second, you learn everything in the right way. So everything's got a really strong focus on intuition and understanding. We learn and apply concepts hands-on using real-world project-based application. The program's going to evolve over time, and obviously that means you will evolve over time. That's what I mean about it being a journey. So you get unlimited access to all current and future content. And I'm currently in the process of adding a whole new section on deep learning, which is super exciting, but also slowly chipping away at my mental sanity. And then I'm also going to add some other cool stuff this year as well, including 2 projects, which I'm really excited about. One using a genetic algorithm, which I think is one of the most interesting algorithms that I've come across in data science, and one using A-star pathfinding. And these are types of projects that will really get you to stand out above other candidates in the field. And then, like I said, it really is all about the journey. So if you want it, you can get unlimited and dedicated guidance and support. So you're never going to get stuck or demotivated, and I can support you with specific problems you have, or I can support you, in the interview preparation for a particular role that you're going for. And it does really work. So you can see on the right a couple of bits of feedback that I've got. So many of my students are now starting to land roles. And in terms of the learning itself, the reviews have been really good as well. So if that sounds interesting to you, I don't want to sort of plug it any more than that. If that sounds interesting to you, then you can check out datascienceinfinity.com, which you can see down on the bottom left of screen. And I'm actually running some huge discounts on this for the month of May. So 60% off and 84% off the price of joining the 2 different plans. So if it does sound like something that could really push you forward in your career, do check out the site and make sure you connect with me on LinkedIn and just DM me for those discount codes. Or alternatively, you can send me an email to andrew@analyticslink.com, which you can see down on the bottom right there. But these discounts do only run until the end of May, and many of the places are gone. So you may well need to be a little bit quick on that one. But if you have any questions at all, definitely get in touch. I'm more than happy to chat about anything. I just love talking data science. So definitely get in touch. But enough of that. That is all from me for now. But thanks to Diane for letting me talk a little bit about Data Science Infinity. So now I believe we are going to head to the live Q&A. So you will need to head over to the sessions area. And I really do encourage you all to ask any questions you have, and also to ask to go live with your questions. So some of you will be selected to go live with your questions, and it's a much more fun way of getting to talk to each other. So I will see you over in the sessions area in a moment.